trust me, I get it. You're feeling the pressure to keep your faith separate from your work, worried that pursuing your God-given dreams might be seen as selfish or misguided. Here's what I've discovered. Our faith isn't a liability in our leadership. As a matter of fact, it's the source of our strength and wisdom. The real challenge is navigating how to boldly pursue our purpose while staying anchored in our faith. And that's exactly what the Beacon Show is all about. Each week, we bring you biblical wisdom and practical strategies from true beacons, Christian leaders who are illuminating the world. And it's also that you can let your light shine brighter and brighter. I'm Tamara Jackson, and this is The Beacon Show. Today on The Beacon Show, I'm excited to introduce you to my new friend, Todd, whose journey from CPA to ministry leader demonstrates how God uses every experience to prepare us for his purpose. As the incoming CEO of Rescue Mission Alliance, Todd brings over 3 decades of financial and operational expertise to those experiencing homelessness and hardship. Through stories of God's faithfulness and practical business principles, Todd shares how his background in accounting, his time at Gospel Light Publications, and his role as president at Barna Group equipped him for this new season of impact. His story reminds us that no experience is wasted when surrendered to God's purpose. Enjoy. Todd, welcome to the Beacon Show, where wisdom meets faith and success finds its voice. This is a conversation I have been looking forward to for a while. So thank you for making time in your schedule to talk with us about your journey and how God has gifted you. And I just know that it's going to be a blessing to our listening audience. So thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you, Tamara. As I was just saying, it's been a super pleasure getting to know you. I'm really excited about today and just see where the conversation takes us.
Absolutely. Well, you may have noticed because you share with me that you listened to a few episodes of the show, and I shared with you that it is certainly about the different companies and the missions that God has had you on, but it's also about you as a leader and where you started and where God is taking you. So I would love to go back in time, Todd. Tell us about the type of child you were growing up. Like, where did you grow up? What was like life for you?
Yeah. So I'm born and raised in Ventura, California. My kids were born at the same hospital I was born in, which is really cool. And grew up, I've a brother and a sister. I'm the oldest. So I probably have a lot of those oldest child characteristics. I was that good kid, really tried not to get into trouble too much. Grew up in an unbelievable neighborhood. We had, 20, 30 kids on our block. We happened to have the house. My parents had the house that had the big backyard with the trampoline and the skateboarding ramps and all the different kinds of fun things that we did. So we got to host. Grew up in a wonderful Christian home with great parents. My father just passed away in May, but just a really great upbringing, which I think has so much to do. And I know not everyone gets to experience that. And I often question, sometimes, why me, Lord? And that may sound strange because probably people who don't grow up in the environment that I got to grow up in ask that same question. But as I look back, it's been obvious, that the Lord had a plan for me, and we can kind of walk through that. But yeah, just had a really great childhood. Enjoyed high school. I went to a Christian school from kindergarten to 9th grade, then went to public high school, where I'm still friends with many of my high school mates. Ventura is a place that not a lot of people leave. It's pretty nice. We're just a few miles from the beach. So I grew up going to the beach and did all the things, surfing and bodyboarding. And so, yeah, just a really solid, great church experience at First Assembly of God here in Ventura. Yeah, so that's kind of the childhood in a nutshell.
Okay, cool. So grew up in a Christ-centered home. Sounds like you had a lot of cool things at your disposal. You were the cool kid on the block. Sounds like you
Well, a
had some
cool
really
house.
great friends, or at least cool house, right? Okay. Sounds like you had some some really good friends. Tell us about as you grew up and you were making decisions about your vocation, like what you were going to do. What were you thinking you would become, and is that the path that you ultimately chose?
No. Yeah, school came pretty easy for me, and so after high school, I just went to the local, community college here. I went into college thinking I was gonna become a dentist, and so, yeah, pre-med, did the biology, chemistry, all those fun classes. Although my dad, who, was a real estate appraiser for 50 years here in Ventura, always said, learn business, take some business courses. And so I took an accounting course. And by the end of the course, I was helping the instructor kind of teach the class a little bit. And it was kind of fun. And it just came super, I just got debits and credits and assets and liabilities. It just kind of made sense to me. So probably in my second year, I really switched courses to focus in on business and accounting in particular. So I did 2 years at a local college, and then my mom basically bribed me with a couple of ski trips to go to Oral Roberts University's free weekend. They kind of have a so here's this Ventura, California kid going to Tulsa, Oklahoma. But I was all signed up and ready to go to San Diego State University, 30, 40,000 students and 600 people in your accounting 101 class type of thing. So I went back to Tulsa, and first of all, the campus is amazing and beautiful. This is late 80s, to show my age there. Uh, and yeah, it was just amazing. The classes were 20 to 30 people. Many of the instructors were paid $1 because they had real job. They were top of their field. Matter of fact, I spent my second year there studying finance strictly because I had a great relationship with the dean of finance who taught all those courses, who happened to also be the president of the Bank of Oklahoma at the time. So literally our final was an 18-page merger, with the names, protected to protect the innocent. But, we had to basically kind of go through the process of having these two organizations merge. So it was really real life experience. Our tax courses were taught by a 20-year veteran of the IRS. Our marketing courses were taught by, P&G marketing executives. So really just an amazing experience there. But I realized that I wanted to move back to Ventura, and I didn't want to kind of compete with other Ventura CPAs, if you will, with an out-of-state degree. So I decided to do a fifth year at California Lutheran University, which is just 30 minutes down the road here, and finished up my BS in accounting. Took the CPA exam, and before I even graduated, I had a job with a very small local CPA firm, and it was a fantastic start to my career because I had two bosses. One was had been there a long, long time, and he was kind of anything I did for him. He would kind of return to me, "Great job, Todd. Fantastic work." Yada yada. The other CPA was much younger, fresh out of school, fresh into the partnership of the organization, and anything I gave him, he gave back to me completely redlined. Like it was, I shouldn't even be working there. So I actually got to learn from two very different individuals how to balance, my work skills. Like, cause I didn't quite want to be like the younger one, what I call an in the box CPA. There's nothing wrong with that. But I really admired, Bruce, the partner who'd been there for 30, 40 years, and his sort of out of the box thinking. And I really kind of grabbed onto that. And working at a small firm allowed me, a lot of my friends worked at, Fortune 500 companies, uh, auditing for 6 months their accounts payable. I got to audit entire companies, small companies, but, the entire balance sheet, the entire P&L. So I feel like I got a really great understanding of not just one or two items on a balance sheet or P&L, but really how the business operated. So yeah, spent a couple years there, and I don't know how far you want me to go, but that was sort of my change in direction from being pre-med into going into the business world.
And then later on, you found yourself kind of bringing, if I understand, the business skill set that you gained through working as a CPA, and I'm sure many other positions, kind of into the ministry space where you're kind of blending these two worlds. So, talk to us a little bit about how that came to be, because it sounds like when you first started, you were really kind of businesses, but all kinds of businesses, right? But at some point, there must have been some sort of turning point. So talk to us about that.
Yeah. Well, so real quick, from the CPA, from one of my clients hired me on as their controller. So here I am, this very young kid who went in, and I got to work for a female owner, which was fantastic. She was an unbelievable salesperson. And I kind of got to be her right hand person as we grew this company. It was a payroll services company from 3 million to 40 million in like 8 years. It was really kind of right time, right place. But you can imagine all the excitement that went with that. From there, I went started my own business where I had about 6 years of. I was very entrepreneurial, always been very entrepreneurial, and so that was I was there for about 6 years. So then, as you say, I got my first job working for Gospel Light Publication. So I went into the faith world, a for-profit organization that published Sunday school curriculum, vacation Bible school curriculum. We had a book division called Regal Books. It was a very large company, and I went in as the controller. And after a couple of years, they promoted me to VP of Finance, and I finished my time there as this CFO of the organization. But stepping into that role, to your point, bringing, let's say, about 15 years of experience at that time of sort of not, secular work, it was an eye opener. It was absolutely an eye opener to walk into a faith based organization for profit, but yet it sort of had this nonprofit feel to it. Very missional, focused. And honestly, for me, it was a little bit hard to wrap my brain around. How are we producing Sunday school curriculum, vacation Bible school curriculum for children, and producing all these wonderful books, and we're doing this for a profit? And it was then when I started to realize how important it was to be good stewards of the money that an organization has, even more so for a faith-based organization. Because what I started to realize is the better we did, the more Sunday school curriculum we could create, the more vacation Bible school, the more people we could hire. So yeah, it was a bit of a journey for me to kind of go in, and I would say I kind of went in with guns a blazing, and I had my sort of
Uh-oh.
had my business hat on, like, oh, this we should be doing things differently here. We need that. So I also had to learn some people skills, but it was a great transition, and I had an unbelievable mentor, which everyone needs. Michael Hawks was the CFO before me, and he sort of brought me in under his wings. He's a huge man with a gentle spirit, sort of softened me up around the edges as I was getting up to speed on working within the faith industry. But amazing experiences there. I could go on and on. So that was kind of the transition, though, of really understanding that you can bring business principles into the faith-based world.
I love what you shared there, is that you had this epiphany that it's almost more important when we're talking about faith-based business, because we have this mission that we're called to accomplish. And so the better stewards we can be of our resources, that, the people, if we can get more efficient with our operations, all of those things allow us to impact more people for Christ. And that's so huge, because I think, to your point, You mentioned that it almost had a nonprofit feel, and I firmly believe that there's a lot of good in that because that service that I want to minister, I want to help is so important. Yet you've also helped us to kind of reinforce that it's a balancing act, right? Is that I want to have a ministry heart. At the same time, there are some fundamentals of business that I need to employ, and it sounds like the key is not going too far to one side or the other. It's not leaning so far into the heart that you forget that, "Hey, I do actually need to watch these numbers and make sure that we're operating efficiently and being a good steward." And I don't want to, as it sounds like early in your career, I don't want to lean so hard into the business principles and the numbers that I forget why we're doing this and who we're doing it for. So I think that's such a critical point for our viewing and listening audience to hear is it is a balance. It's not either or, it really is both and. So you had this amazing opportunity to serve as comptroller to see how, as you could improve the operations, how you could make a bigger impact. Where did that take you next in your journey?
Well, yeah, and just to kind of go back a little, one of my founding principles. So I'm over 35 years. I've got a lot of principles, but one of my founding principles is the parable of the talents. So that absolutely my favorite parable. There is so much built into that. It's not just about being a good steward, right? Because there's so much more to the first two who invested, who took a risk, who did not sit on the resources that they were given. So to your point about finding that balance, right? I believe strongly that whether you're a church, a nonprofit, or a for-profit organization, growth is absolutely what the Lord is looking at, what look for, whether it's in our faith, the people around us, it's what we do. The parable of the talents has always been forefront in my mind when I am managing the resources, whether that be people, finances, assets of the organization, is how do we maximize kind of the blessing that those things that have been provided, especially within a faith-based organization, to God's glory and to further God's kingdom. So that's, again, that really helped set me on a path of like literally caring for every dollar or every person. And how do I not just bury those talents? How do we get the most out of those talents or resources that we have within an organization? So that process came to life for me when I stepped into the faith world. I applied those same principles when I was in the secular world, but maybe for a different reason. But then once I got into the faith world, really using those, I literally would like manage every dollar in and out of the organization to make sure it was being maximized for the glory of God and for spreading God's kingdom. And we needed to be profitable so that we could grow, so that we could invest more. And those are those tough decisions because sometimes that requires cost cutting, right? So there's sort of three principles that I have. Another principle when you're trying to maximize a company, it's you can control revenue, you can control cost, and you can control efficiency. So applying the parable of the talents to all three of those, I think is something that I took away from that initial role into the faith-based world that eventually led me to Barna.
Wow. So I love that. So how do I grow revenue? How do I control or potentially cut, in some instances, expenses? And that means some really hard decisions on what you prioritize, because you don't want to cut something that's really critical and essential to the work that you do. But at the same time, math is math. And in order for the numbers to work and there to be a profit, there does need to be some adjustments. And I love the last one also. How do I become more efficient at what I do? And many of the guests on the show have talked about that is this spirit of continuous improvement. Like, we're really great at this and we're delivering a quality product, but is there a way that we can do it differently so that maybe it doesn't take as much time, or it doesn't take as much expense to do it, or maybe we can shorten the cycle time that it takes to create it? Like, just constantly challenging ourselves. How can we get better? I think that's what I have taken away from it. How can I get better? It's good. And we're operating in excellence. We're doing everything we can to do that. But how can we continue to innovate and look at different ways to do things? So talk to us about what Barna does and how these three principles play a role in the work that you do there.
Wow, I'm sure that's a loaded question. Barna does a lot. We are a small but powerful team, and we have locations currently in Ventura, Atlanta, Nashville, Denver, and Fort Worth. It has been quite a 10-year journey. When I joined the company, I think I was employee number 5. And David Kinnaman, Barna's celebrating its 40th anniversary this month, which is really exciting. George Barna did an unbelievable job setting the groundwork, building the Barna brand. And in 2009, David had been working for George for about 15 years. David Kinnaman purchased the business from George Barna. Very small, 100% research-based. They would do a couple of research projects, and then George would write a book. And in fact, he wrote 50 books in 25
Wow.
years.
50.
Yeah,
Well,
probably up to 60 now. So he was a proficient writer, and David in 2007 published his first book called Unchristian, which went on to sell lots of copies. So Barna is many things. It is a research company. It is a thought leadership company. When I started at Barna, David pulled me aside and he said, I didn't buy a research company. I bought a communications company. And I'm scratching my head. I'm like, well, we're like 99% research. So what does that mean? So, but it was very, very helpful to me to sort of, as David cast the vision for what he saw at that time, which was what Barna is now, really. And that helped me, as I had come from a publishing company, to understand that David wanted to take all these amazing research insights that we've received by working with our clients, by doing all these great research projects, and then publishing them into these research reports that we've now done well over 100, 110, 120 of these reports in 10 years that I've been here. So very, very prolific production of what we call these monographs. These are beautiful 4-color research reports that you can get on our website. So so that was the beginning of the journey with David. I'm not a one to come in and not grow. It just doesn't work for me. So it was really fun, and David gave me the flexibility to bring in I looked over at Brenda because she was one of my first hires, who was our production manager from Gospel Light. We both came from there to build this publishing company, really, or communications company that David envisioned at that time. And so bringing in Barna was a very small company. So when you talk about having to really focus in on making those difficult choices of how do we grow revenue? So in other words, where do we invest? There's the your opportunity cost. So if you got $2 to invest, and you get 10% return over here or 30% return over there, you can't do both. You got to make the difficult choice of deciding which one you want to do. And then, how do we control costs in a small organization while we're trying to grow and produce these beautiful, expensive projects? And then how do we do it as efficiently as possible? So from day one at Barna, I've been able to kind of talk about and institute those principles in and throughout the company. It's been really great for David, David is an unbelievable thought leader. His heart and passion for the church is why I came to join him at Barna, because his dad's a pastor, and he was going to be a pastor, and he basically took an internship role with George Barna right out of Biola, and ended up staying 30 years. a pretty incredible journey for David as well. Again, his passion for the church, for pastors, for faith leaders, is just incredible, super inspiring to me. And my role was always to come in and to help David execute his vision for the organization. So I'm very happy to say that over the last 10 years, we've seen unbelievable growth, tremendous expansion in I believe, our influence in the partners that we work with. We serve mostly nonprofit organizations and help them with their mission. We do everything from brand research to pastoral research. What do Christians think about this? Sort of where does faith and culture meet, if you will. So being able to build a team. We're still a small team, but we're up to about 23 employees. We have lots of contractors we work with. Solving, one of my favorite things to do. And again, when you talk to these young leaders, you have to grab this one by the horn, because one of my favorite things to do is to solve complex problems. And the life is full of complex problems, marriage, business, relationships, churches, you name it. So the more you can embrace change and the reality of the complex environment that we live in, I mean, everyone can see what's going on around us today. It is a very complex time. The more you can just embrace that and actually get excited about trying to solve not the symptom of the problem, right? That's what government tends to do. Let's pour money or try to solve the symptom. How do we solve the core issue behind the problem? And so sometimes those are real small issues. Sometimes they're really, really big issues, but there's never a shortage of them. And so I would say to young leaders out there, prepare yourself. Don't be afraid of taking on those challenges. When I look back to see my journey to where I've been and where I'm going, it's the times I failed where I've gotten the most growth. So trying to take on these challenges and failing at them. You don't grow when things are good, right? Whether it's in your marriage or life or whatever it is, you only grow under stress and under challenging times. So embrace those times. And there's been plenty of those times in the last 10 years. And work is fun. I mean, if it's not fun, you're doing the wrong thing. You've got to really enjoy what you do.
It's not fun. You're doing the wrong thing. I love that. And I love that you can say that, because some people watching or listening to us may think, well, how can, watching all these numbers and solving, as you've said, complex problems be fun? So I'd love to dig into that a little bit. Let's talk about, like, when you encounter, Todd, this really complex problem, what are some things that you tell yourself to keep from getting like all over the place, falling apart? Oh my gosh, the sky is falling. I think that would be helpful to our audience. How do you keep perspective when you encounter one of those really complex problems?
Wow, that's a great question. And you just said a great word, perspective. I love to remind our team on a constant basis of how we got here. So you may be in the middle of a really difficult situation, but if you don't understand how you got there, then it's harder to solve that situation. So I always remind myself of the details, and no matter how small, of how we got into a situation, whether it be a culture situation, and those are ongoing. You can have the best culture and win cultural awards. You're still going to have culture issues, communication issues. How do you communicate effectively and efficiently? Sometimes you can't do both. So understanding how to communicate, understanding your audience, whether it's a vendor, a client, or a team member, it's a lot of work, but it's worth it when you face these challenges. So I try to tell myself when a challenge is ahead of me, I encourage myself to do all of those things to gain perspective before trying to solve any issue. And then I just look at in full disclosure, I love The Game of Business, the book, The Game of Business. And that's how I approach it. That doesn't diminish the importance at all of what we do or what a business does or whether it's a mission or a church. But for me, relating, I grew up doing all the kinds of sports and I love sports. So for me, being able to make some analogies or use some metaphors, and relate it to sports. Hey, how are we going to strategize our way through the best lineup we can get to maximize the most runs that we want in order to win, each baseball game? Or what play are we going to run, in the third quarter to come back from, a bad first half? So that's how I approach it. Everyone is different. Not everyone's into sports, but the more I can sort of relate it to that book, that helps me approach it with a little bit of joy. Because there's some hard problems that we have to face, when you have to do things. So that's sort of how, and yeah, that's sort of how I do it.
So The Game of Business, that's a good book recommendation for our viewing and listening audience. And what I heard there, Todd, is that there's an element of I get to be creative. That's what I heard. I get to be creative because there is a way. There's also an element of hope to what you just shared with us is like you're not thinking that this is unsolvable. Like there's no way out of this. There has to be a way out of it. I just have to figure out what the right play is to run or who I need to be on the lineup in order to be able to score, right? So there is a combination that's going to work, and I get to use the creativity, the skills that God has given me to try to come up with some plays to make it happen. But you come into it with it sounds like with a sense of optimism that there is a way to solve this problem. It's not going to take us out. It's not over. It's just a matter of figuring out the right pieces. Would that be a fair statement?
Yeah, actually, I've had several people tell me I'm optimistic and realistic. So somehow I've got a combination of those two things. Too many stories to tell, but I am very optimistic. I just always believe there's a solution to every problem. And I do believe it is what God instilled in me. I remember very clearly when I was 12 years old sitting in church, and there was a sermon on worry. And, the second shortest verse of the Bible, do not worry. And I'm like, that sounds good to me. I'm going to do my best to not worry. And there's so much, again, there's kind of like the parable of the talents. There's so much, or all the parables, there's so much packed into that, right? Because it is about hope, that there is always hope for a given situation. Even when you're in the middle of a potential layoff situation, I have seen time and time again when that can be so hard. But when you know it's the right thing to do, it's actually best for both the organization and the person. And that person can go on, and I've seen it. It's happened to me, and I've seen it happen to other people where you go on and the next thing is 10 times better than the thing you came from. Now, in the situation, when you're going through it, it can be painful and all that. But again, it forces us to rely not on ourselves. It's not what I did. It's what God has in store for us. And it's challenging and difficult to do. But yeah, that you're right. The hope, you're so good at calling out, man, being
Yeah.
creative. I've never thought of myself as a creative person, but when I'm solving complex problems, you have to have a lot of creativity. Yeah, those are creativity, hope, perspective. Those are all great words to kind of circle and jot down and try to remember.
I love it. So let's walk through. I know you said you've got countless stories, but I would like to lean into one scenario, maybe not necessarily get into the details of the story, but one scenario, because this is a reality of business that I've seen. I've been laid off in corporate before, and there have been times in my business as an entrepreneur where I've had to make shifts and say, "Hey, we're going to go in this direction." So that means, hey, either we evolve your role or maybe it's time to move on and do something different. And it is a very tough, as you've said, situation to be in. And these are the situations. That's why I want to press into this. these are the situations where sometimes business can get a bad rep, right? Because I can't believe you're laying off these people. They've got a family. They've got all these things to do. It's cold. It's heartless. But I heard you say, and I've experienced it too. I can actually think back to that time when I was in court, when I was like, it was the best thing that happened to me. Didn't think it was the case at the time, but it was ultimately the best thing that could happen to me. For the leader who's watching us, who's listening to us, that's having to walk through leading through a layoff, what advice can you give them on how to navigate all of these things? Because it is a challenging thing, and people are going to say probably some not so helpful things as they have to walk this out. So based on all of your years of experience, what would your advice be to someone that's kind of walking through that for the first time?
That's another great question. Well, it's so important to remember that you're not only impacting the people who are leaving, you're impacting the people who are staying. So really understanding that is critical, and being decisive. A lot of passion or compassion, I guess, for people who have a hard time with that. I mean, right? Because it is a reality of business. There are growth periods. There are periods of redesign or reorganization that are necessary. And in the faith organization, hopefully you're through prayerful consideration. It's important, whether it is a layoff or whether it's a termination, if there's a lack of performance. Too many times, and I have seen this play out so many times in the faith world, where you have someone who is not right for the role. Oftentimes, you can take a person who is excelling in what they do and then you promote them into, say, a managerial role. They don't want to be a manager. So again, it's really understanding every role. And I think a CEO or a president and manager should really have a firm understanding of everything that their staff is doing, so you can really make these good decisions. So yeah, through prayerful consideration, but really it's something that, and most leaders have been around for a time, you get a gut for, and when the time, whether it's financially constrained, a constraint that you're like, okay, we have to do these cuts and this is tough, or there's a change in direction of the company, rip the Band-Aid off. That's going to be my advice. I think some people might have other advice. I think when you know, and the longer you draw out those decisions, the harder it is, not only on the people, again, who you're potentially changing, but the staff. It'll increase a lack of trust, because other people probably know the same thing. I mean, that's what I think so many leaders don't know. They think that they're kind of the only ones that see, but staff feel it. Again, if you don't have, for me, so I'll do 5 more of my principles: accountability, transparency, clarity, simplicity, and intentionality. So you kind of have to have all 5 of those things, again, kind of playing together. And those are really important when you're making a huge decision, like a staff change, whether it's 1 person or 20 people or more. It's really important to remember that those are things that will help you as a leader, but also help your team and your staff who are questioning the decision. Why did this person go? And sometimes there's survivor's guilt, all those things. So, I mean, there's no simple answer to your question. It's really a matter of heart and gut, prayer, and business.
I love it though. You may not realize that you shared some words of wisdom, but you certainly did, because I heard you say, hey, this is something that you need to practically walk out, but don't forget that you have God as your source of direction. So you're being prayerful as you're doing this. This is not something that you just kind of do in your own strength. You want God to guide you on what to do and how to do it. And in addition to that, you don't want to drag this thing out, which is, I know I've made that mistake before, and I'm sure others that are watching it, you're raising your hand because you're You are indecisive. And I love that too. Be decisive. You're indecisive. I'm not sure if this is the right thing to do. I don't want to make a mistake. And a lot of times we do know in our heart of hearts that it is the right thing to do, but there's fear around making this decision. So I keep holding on and I keep holding on. I keep holding on. But I love what you shared is, hey, rip the Band-Aid off because it is ultimately the right thing to do overall, right? And that's really good perspective because yes, it's going to impact this individual. And that's hard to process and accept sometimes because we build really great relationships with the people that we work with. And at the same time, you also have to look at the health of the organization. And if the organization is not healthy, then we cannot continue to serve and to make the impact that God has called us to make. So is one person or five people more important than the mission, the calling that God has given us? And when you put it in that perspective, that's what I heard you say. It's like, wait a minute, we might be getting out of hand here because what is most important is that we stay focused on the mission and the calling that God has given us. And there's also an element of trust that if we're doing our best to stay focused on the mission and to be faithful, and that's led us to this decision that yes is unfortunate, that God has a plan for this individual, for these five people, that he's already accounted for them. They're going to be okay. It's going to sting. It's going to hurt. It's going to be perhaps a hard season for them, but none of this is catching him by surprise. He's going to take care of them. He's going to take care of the organization. And ultimately, we will all be better off on the other side of this decision. So you shared a lot of wisdom there that I know is a blessing to the audience. So thank you for walking through that with us. You are actually in a season of transition yourself, Todd, which I want to talk about. By the time this episode airs, you will be sitting in a different seat. So talk to us about this new opportunity. And then I'm curious. I want to know the story of how you ended up with this opportunity and what made you say yes.
Amen. Well, thank you. To start, I'm filled with mixed emotions. I've been with Barna for 10 years, been president for 4 years this month, actually, as of Monday. It's been an incredible time. I'm just so full of mixed emotions. But there is change afoot. And, managing, thinking through all those changes, not only changes at Barna, changes with myself, and so, yes, I have, and this has all happened literally within the last few weeks, because God opened a door. So for about 2 years, I've served on the board of directors of Rescue Mission Alliance, an amazing nonprofit that serves the homeless community, the less fortunate. It's a transitional living. We do vocational training for people who are coming out of very rough situations in around 5 locations around Southern California. So a good friend of mine is the current CEO. I guess by times it's there, he'll be the past CEO. So he is resigning and recommended to the board after talking to me if I would be interested in this role, which I said, yep, every time God opens a door, I at least want to stick my toe in there. So through a lot of prayer and seeking God's wisdom, I've decided to take on the role of CEO of Rescue Mission Alliance. Effective December 2nd. So I will, I guess, already have been there for a little while when this episode airs. But I'm really excited about the opportunity. It's amazing to look back at the doors that God has opened up. And I know, again, this doesn't always happen, although I challenge people to really, again, look at perspective as to where they are in their careers and how they got there. It's not by an accident. If you're a believer, if you pray the Lord's Prayer, that his will be done on heaven and on earth, that there's no accidents. You may have choices, and God sometimes allows us to have choices. I could have chosen to stay at Barna, but this is an amazing opportunity. I'm super thrilled. I've always known that the Lord has put in me missional work. I didn't know exactly what that looked like. My son is going to be a missionary. He just informed us he's getting ready to go long term to Tajikistan. So prayers appreciated for him when he graduates. He's been there. He served with YWAM for about 3 months. Uh, so that's some big change that's going on with us personally. But yeah, I'm super excited about the opportunity. It was not the process was not one that was taken lightly. I had many ongoing conversations with obviously my wife, and even some coworkers about what does the future hold for Barna. I also feel, and I think it's okay. I feel a tremendous sense of accomplishment over the last 10 years at Barna. And the reason I bring that up is because I feel like I have a release. Like I feel like I've accomplished my personal goals that were in alignment with David's goals. Yeah, I feel like God has released me from that role and has prepared for me this role. This will be my first foray into the nonprofit world. And there's a lot to discuss there, as we've kind of talked about, from the secular world to the nonprofit world and all the principles that can be carried into that, good stewardship and all of those fun things. So I'm excited about the opportunity. RMA has an amazing reputation here locally. There's rescue missions all over the country, and I've already met through two connections that I have through Barna, two other CEOs of other rescue missions. So I feel like, again, God's already aligning some potential connection. It's daunting. It's a daunting task in a lot of sense, but it's feet on the ground. There's real, we're really there helping people. At Barna, it's been amazing, with the work that we do. And I always felt God was using my administrative skills, management skills, operational skills to grow the business so that we could reach more churches and provide better information. And now I feel like God's bringing me to this place where I can take all those same skills, but impact, on a personal level, people's lives in and around us. So super excited about that. And yeah, it's, as of right now, I'm still a couple of weeks away from moving into that role.
Well, we are excited for you and the journey that God has you on. So we'll have to stay connected. So I'll encourage the viewing and listening audience, stay connected with Todd and see the great work that ends up happening at Rescue Mission Alliance. Just from the interviews that I've had with leaders, Downtown Rescue Mission, Keith Overhaul, amazing leader in the mission space. We had the opportunity to have Tom Vozo from Homeboy Industries on the show. And there are so many great leaders out there that I'm confident will be willing to help and to guide and provide advice. But then also you are bringing a wealth of experience into the space that is going to be a blessing to the Rescue Mission Alliance, but also other mission leaders. So I just look forward to what God is going to do through this transition. My experience has been, Todd, that God always accomplishes multiple things out of one move. So we can look at it and think, oh, well, I'm just going over here and doing this. But then when all is said and done, we see all of the ripple effects that this one change, this one move has had. And that's also taught me, like, as you have shared, when now sometimes it's not crystal clear, but when that this is God that's opening a door, even if it looks a little bit scary, you're stepping outside of your comfort zone, all the things that trust it and embrace that opportunity, because there's something that God wants to do. And I think it's twofold, right? It's in you to help you to see, hey, I've got you, even in this new space where you're probably going to be over your head. That's normally what the journey with God is like. I've got you. And there's also something that I want to do I want to impact this space, and I'm inviting you to be a part of it. So we look forward to seeing what that looks like for you. As we wrap up, it's always amazing to me how quickly the time goes. I want to pose this question, Todd, around legacy. So for many of us, that is something that's far off in our mind. We're like, oh, I'm going to do this. I feel like in some capacity, I'm going to be working for a long time. It might look a little different, right? But there's always something the purposeful that I want to be focused on. But one of the things that I also think about is, okay, when it is all said and done, and I stop working in this capacity and I get to that place where I'm really looking back on my life. What is it? What is it that I want to leave behind? What do I want people to remember? So I'd love to hear your perspective on that, Todd. And it can be from a professional point of view, but also personal, just whatever you think of when you think of legacy. What is it that you want that to look like? And what do you want to leave behind?
Fun question. Well, definitely on the personal side. I mean, honestly, I'm not one to think about what my legacy is going to be or will be. I think there's a statistic out there. It's like you're literally forgotten, 20 years or less, you know, after you're gone. But personally, I would love to just, make a great impact on my friends and family. Most importantly, I just want them to know that I was a man of character, that I was a family man. And of course, those are difficult things to be and do today. But so really on that side, just my dad's funeral was amazing. Like just hundreds of people and the testimonies of who he was as a person, his business, although he outlived many of his business acquaintances, he was just a pillar of the community. I think that's cool. Professionally, honestly, to me, it's more about the legacy of the organization. So I think if we leave our organizations, and I think whether you're young again, if you're a Gen Z, millennial leader, and you're getting to these positions of management, you're growing in your influence. I challenge you. It's like it's not about you. It's about the organization. It's about your mission. It's about what you're doing. And I think it also gives you such a great perspective, a much broader perspective. If you think about, am I leaving Barna in a better place than it was when I got there? My position is done and over. I'm moving on. My next goal is, can I take RMA to the next level? Not for me, but to reach more people, to broaden our scope of helping people. So I think those are just off the top of my head, thinking about legacy, that's kind of how I would answer that question. Another great question.
I love it. One last one. One final piece of advice that you would give, Todd. We've talked about a lot, but this will be the last thing that our viewing and our listening audience hears from this interview. And often we find that last word is what often really sticks out and resonates in the mind of the audience. So what is one thing that you really want those that are aspiring to do great things for God? What is one thing that you want them to keep in mind as they grow and they advance in their mission?
Yeah. Don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to fail. You can always make a wrong decision. It's better to make a quick wrong decision in many circumstances than to, drag something out, kind of like what we talked about earlier. So it's easier to correct a mistake than it is to build and build and build upon something. And then 6 months later, now it's not just a little molehill, you've created a mountain and you have to sort of go back and try to solve that. So if you have a boss who can be hard on that, again, there's lots of jobs out there. You want to find a place where you are free to fail, free to learn, make mistakes. It's the only way you're going to improve yourself, those around you. If you're a leader, allowing those mistakes to happen, being humble. I mean, again, you have to hold people accountable, but I believe you can do that. And part of that is even helping people through mistakes that they make. And that's both personally and professionally.
I love it. It reminds me of, and I don't know if you've heard this story before too. I can't remember exactly where I read it, but it was, I think, an executive at a company that had really made this huge blunder that literally cost the company millions of dollars. And he was afraid that he was going to be fired. And his boss was like, "Oh no, I just invested millions of dollars in you. You're staying here and we're going to figure this out because I've made an investment in you." And, that's a really extreme example, but I think it underscores the principle that you're talking about here is you want a place where you do have an opportunity to make mistakes where you can be forgiven, you can learn and grow. If it doesn't work out, if it's not going to always work out like the example that I gave you, sometimes it's going to be, we've got to part ways. But then I think the beauty of it is that we know that our ultimate hope, our trust is in God. And He's going to ensure that we land somewhere where we will have an opportunity to take the things that we learned from that really hard valley experience of making that mistake, and we will learn and grow from there. And it's not the end, right? It's one chapter of the story, but it's not the end. So many words of wisdom that you've shared with us, Todd. We certainly wish you the best as you step into your role at Rescue Mission Alliance. Looking forward to what God is going to do in you and through you in that new position. And on behalf of the Beacon Show, just want to wish you the best and thank you for everything that you poured out for us today.
Been my pleasure. Tamara, I just really, really appreciate you and what you're doing. And you're just a phenomenal host, and you've made it very, very good. So appreciate that.